I begin in the name of the God whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. Why Islam? Why believe in prophets? I'm talking about the Qur'an, the message which the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, brought and presented it as the message of God. I've mentioned that this message is one of the four important categories of arguments that we can present to see, to show, to verify that the Prophet indeed was God's representative. Now, the Quranic message, which was presented more than 1400 years ago, which is fully preserved. What was presented 1400 plus years ago has not changed even by a single margin. No word, no letter, nothing has changed. Although the world that we are living in has changed tremendously. The information that we have now today with us is very different from the information, the understanding of reality that people 1400 years ago used to have. And the Quran is not just talking about the law, it's also talking about the phenomena of the nature. Why? Because as I have already presented earlier, the Quran is inviting the attention of the reader to look at the world around him or her, use his/her intellect to see that there is a God, that this world has been designed in a manner that we are led to believe in God, and as we shall see later, we are led to believe in the fact that there is a life hereafter. Now, this world that we witness is a world that has been investigated by science much more deeply, in much more detail, and much more convincingly than it was done ever before. So, what we have now with us is a possibility that we look at what is mentioned in the Quranic text on the one hand, and the information and data that science has been able to find out, to confirm on the other, and compare the two. Indeed, the Quran is not a book of science. The Quran is a book of guidance, and while guiding the reader, the Quran invites him or her to believe in its verses, to believe that there is a God, to believe that there is going to be life hereafter. And in order for this purpose to be achieved, Quran is giving arguments involving the phenomena of the nature for the reader to look at, to analyze, to reach the conclusions that the Quran wants him, her to reach. So, the Quran talks about the sun, the moon, the stars, the winds, the clouds, the oceans, rainfall, plants, animals, humans, human body, and whatnot. The process of reproduction, etc. These phenomena of the nature are presented to the reader for him to marvel at the Almighty's brilliance and the manner He has created life, and He has enabled us to benefit from the different resources that have been made available for our purpose. Now, obviously, the Quran uses a certain language to draw the attention of the reader towards these phenomena of the nature. And science has enabled us to know now in much more detail and with much more clarity as to what the reality of these phenomena is. So, not surprisingly, there have been people, scientists, who have looked at the scientific information and data on the one hand, and the Quranic text on the other. I will just present before you two well-known works, one by a French scientist, Maurice Bucaille, who in his book, The Bible, the Quran and Science, which was written originally in French, he lets us know that in his investigation, which was initially undertaken as a Christian, he came to learn about the fact that although there are conflicts in what the Old Testament says and what we now know as scientific facts, there are conflicts between what the New Testament says and what we now have as scientific realities, but there are no contradictions between science and the Quran. That's one work. Obviously, there have been criticism of his work as well. I'm just presenting it as an example. The fact that such a claim was made in itself is remarkable, because we know that a book of science written 200 years ago would be completely obsolete and redundant today, because the facts discovered by science and the manner they are being discovered and revisited and new realities are emerging, it's not possible for any work done in the past to stand the scrutiny of investigation and critical examination. But there is an important scientist who says that despite all that development, he found the Quran to be fault-free, even if looked at from a scientific point of view. One might say that Maurice Bucaille, towards the later part of his life, converted to Islam, and therefore there might be some conspiracy in what he wrote and then what he ultimately decided to turn out to be. We have another remarkable name, an embryologist by the name of Keith L. Moore, who died only recently. He was all along a Christian, and he confirmed the fact that the information mentioned in the Quran regarding the process of human reproduction has been presented in such remarkably correct language that my latest understanding of the process of reproduction, Keith L. Moore says, cannot pick any statement of the Quran that could be criticized for being incorrect. That testimony in itself is remarkable, because as I said, don't forget that the Quran was presented more than 1400 years ago by a man who was not even literate. The book is presenting the message of God, which primarily focuses on guidance, moral and spiritual guidance of the individual, but while doing so is inviting the attention of the reader towards the phenomena of the nature, and the way the phenomena has been described, it's couched in a language which even today cannot be criticized for being untrue, incorrect, inaccurate. I will just point at one or two remarkable things of similar nature in the Quran. There is a verse in the Quran, verse 34 of chapter 31, Surah Luqman, wherein God talks about 5 realities of life, which God has talked about in a manner that gives an impression to a reader as if he's saying that he knows them, but nobody else knows. He talks about the fact that the day of judgment is going to come, and only God knows when it's going to come. He mentions that He causes rain to fall. He is the one who knows what is in the wombs of mothers. Nobody knows what he or she is going to do the next day. Nobody knows where he or she is going to die. God is knowledgeable and fully aware. A good number of Muslims for a very long time believed that these are the 5 realities which only God knows and nobody else knows. And it became almost a part of Muslim creed, belief system, that these 5 realities are unknown to anyone other than God. Obviously, now it's possible for the rainfall to be predicted fairly accurately. And it's possible for a human child's sex to be determined before the child is born fairly accurately. Now, obviously, for somebody who is searching for the truth in the Qur'an, it's going to be a tough challenge. Indeed, it was a challenge for me as well. But the remarkable thing about this verse is that if you read it, you would find that unlike the popular understanding amongst many Muslims, the verse in actual fact is very clearly claiming that there are 3 realities which only God knows and nobody else knows. When is the day of judgment going to arrive? What an individual is going to do the next day, and where an individual is going to die. As far as the other 2 realities, the phenomenon of the rainfall and what's there in the wombs of mothers is concerned, the Quran does not say clearly that only God knows them and nobody else can know them. In fact, in case of rainfall, the Quran says, وَيُنَزِّلُ الْغَيْثِ. He is the one who causes the rain to fall. The verse doesn't say that only God knows when rain is going to fall. And when it comes to the identification of the sex of a child in the womb of mother, the Quran says, وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْأَرْحَامِ. He knows what is in the wombs. It doesn't say that nobody else can know it. Now, imagine that a man, if he was to author a text on his own and was presenting it to his followers, die-hard followers, what could have stopped him from saying, nobody can know what is in the wombs of mothers? But the Quran does not say that. So that obviously in itself is a remarkable statement that we find in the Quran. There is another remarkable statement that's in the Quran. In chapter 10, verse 92, Quran, while talking about the historical incident of the drowning of Pharaoh, mentions the fact that when Pharaoh was about to drown, the Almighty addressed him and said, Al-Yawm, today, Nunajjika bi badanika. We will save your body. Litakuna liman khalfaka aya. So that you should become a sign for the people to come. That is, we will not allow your body to be disintegrated as normally happens in the case of people who die. We will preserve your body and will make sure that it becomes a sign for the people of the later times, so that they should look at your body and should believe in God, that God is the one who had caused a tyrant ruler to be destroyed, and yet his body was promised to be preserved, and lo and behold, here the body is. For 1300 years after the revelation of this verse, which as we know was a part of the Quran because the Quran is fully preserved, you cannot take any verse out of the text or insert a new verse into its text because of the manner it has been preserved. So for the first 1300 years or so, This verse was recited, but there was no trace of Pharaoh's body anywhere. And then in the late 19th century, Pharaoh's body was discovered, and we now can see it in the Cairo Museum, fulfilling the promise that's mentioned in the Qur'an. So that obviously in itself is remarkable. Now, why is it that all these facts are found in the Qur'an? Obviously, the Qur'an is, as I said, not a book of science. It's a book of guidance. While giving guidance to humans, the Almighty is describing different realities of this world, but the manner they have been described, their description, even though it was made some 1400 plus years ago, is fault-free, because the text is of God. As one Muslim intellectual rightly pointed out, we should not be surprised to see that whatever is mentioned in the Qur'an has been proved as factual, because while the Qur'an is the word of God, what science discovers is the act of God. And there can be no contradiction, no discrepancy between God's words and His acts. Another very interesting feature of the Qur'an in the same category is the Quranic description of history. The Qur'an is neither a book of science nor a book of history. Both scientific facts and historical facts have been presented for the same one purpose, which is guidance, which is the subject matter, the goal of the Qur'an. While describing history, the Qur'an talks about a number of events that took place before the Qur'an was revealed. Many of those incidents, many of those historical events have also been included in the Bible. And why not? The Old Testament and the New Testament are both God's books. At least some parts of the Bible are God's books. There is no denying the fact. So they also talk about a number of different incidents that took place in the past. However, the Qur'an, after having mentioned a number of stories, ends up by saying that these are the verses of God. This description of this particular incident is from God, and there is no doubt about it. Now, the importance of this claim is that even though the Prophet had no knowledge of what happened in the past, he never went through any formal education, and he didn't even know what was there in the Bible. The description, at least in 3 passages of the Qur'an, in Surah Al-Baqarah, the 2nd chapter, in verse 252, Qur'an mentions, after having described the story of Saul and Goliath, the Qur'an says, "These are the verses of God. We are reciting them before you, and you didn't know about them before." So one might say that obviously this description could have been borrowed from the Bible. The fact of the matter is that what is mentioned in the Bible and what is mentioned in the Qur'an do have lots of commonalities, and quite understandably, because when you're talking about the same story, details of that story have to match. But in some vital areas of description, the story mentioned in the Old Testament and the story of the Qur'an disagree. And an impartial, objective reader of the 2 texts can give a clear understanding as to which of the 2 texts seems to be making more sense. A similar mention has been made when the story of Zachariah and Mary has been presented. Likewise, a similar statement has been made in the Qur'an after the story of Joseph has been narrated in the 12th chapter of the Qur'an, verse 102. The story of Zachariah and Mary has been mentioned in verse 44 of chapter 3, Surah Al Imran. In all these three verses, the Qur'an is stating the fact that whatever we have described is the truth. And this is because the Qur'an is God's word, which the angels have communicated to the Prophet. Now it is for the reader to read these verses and to come to the conclusion that the message of the Qur'an is the message of God, because what it contains is nothing but the truth.